Hi everyone, I'm OneMind Dogs coach Niki Drage. Thank you so much for joining me in this webinar about reliable reverse spins, one of my favourite handling techniques. I really love it because it's such a versatile technique that really suits such a big variety of dogs and handlers. At OneMind Dogs, we're very passionate about helping people understand their dog's perspective. So during the webinar, I'll be mostly discussing the handling from your dog's point of view and how they naturally respond to changes in your body language. The reverse spin, like many of our handling techniques, is all based on your dog's natural reactions to your body language. So once you understand how and why the reverse spin works, there's actually no extra training required for your dog. So let's have a look at the slides here. If we just go to the next one. So the three main points I'm going to touch on is what is a reverse spin and why do we use it? How to control the degree of the turn with the reverse spin. And that's one of the things I love about this technique is you can actually choose how tight you want the dog to turn. And there's a few different elements we can use to affect that. So I'll talk about that. And then some example sequences of where you might use reverse spins and why. And we'll talk through those a little bit. It's really important to remember that this is all about you and your dog. Every dog is different. Every dog has different needs in terms of how much turning information they need. So it's not about your neighbor's dog or your friend's dog. It's all about you and your dog. So I really want you to remember that perspective when we're talking here. I will only touch on these topics, by the way. I won't go in super detail because then we'll be here forever. And we will go into more detail into each of these topics in the follow-up emails. So if you're not getting those after this webinar, please let me know, and then I will make sure that you have the permission to receive them because they're much more detailed and they'll have videos and course maps. So it'll be a great way to deepen your understanding. So let's talk about what is a reverse spin. I've got a bit of a video for you. Let me just find it here because I think that the easiest way to sort of demonstrate these handling techniques is to see somebody doing them. So this is a part of our video from the OneMind Dogs website, and it shows a few different reverse spins in a few different places with Miko and a Sheltie here. So that shows you one, and we'll go back through these in a bit more slow motion in a minute. And then this is from a different angle, so a different amount of cues are required, which I will break down in a minute. But that gives you a bit of an idea of just what a reverse spin looks like, really. So then we'll just look at it now in slow motion, and I want to break down the reverse spin into the 7 handling elements. So all of our handling techniques are broken down into these 7 elements of body language that the dogs understand, from the most important to the least important. So our most important is motion. And with the reverse spin, your motion is actually a really, really important element. Am I making that clear? Because that's like the one that you use the most to control the tightness of the turn. So there's 2 parts of your motion that are important. The first one is if you have a look at Miko, as he is moving towards the jump, he keeps moving. So he doesn't stop and send his dog forward. Because one of the problems with standing still and sending the dog places is that you don't have that element of motion anymore to cue anything for the dog. So you've actually lost one of your 7 handling elements. So it's always really important to continue moving. You don't have to move fast. You don't have to sprint, but you do need to keep moving. So with the reverse spin, you move towards the jump until the dog is committed to the jump, which basically looks like they're looking at it and they're saying, yep, I've got it, that's the next jump. Once that happens, you need to do your reverse spin and move towards the next obstacle. One of the most common mistakes with reverse spin is that after the dog is committed, the person continues moving forward towards the jump, and that pressure causes the dog to do a rear cross. So if your dog often does a rear cross during the reverse spin, then that's probably one of the main reasons. And in that case, just try turning and leaving earlier. So if we have a look again here, let's have a look. I might just go back to the start of the video so you can really watch his motion. So see how he then moves away even before the dog is jumping. So he moves forward towards the jump until he sees the commitment, and then he moves away as the dog is doing the jump. And that movement away really helps the dog know where to go next. So that brings me to the other part of movement. So the direction of your movement is super important, and we will talk about that a little bit later in more detail in this webinar. And also your rhythm change. So rhythm change is basically like changing the speed of your motion. The tighter a turn you need, the more rhythm change you will show. And again, we'll touch on that a bit more in a minute. Then there's position. Position is your second handling element. Position in regards to the reverse spin is very flexible. You don't have to be right up at the jump. You could be at a distance, you could be lateral, behind. It's really versatile that way. The biggest thing to know with position in reverse spin is that you need to do the reverse spin when the dog is committed to the jump. It doesn't matter where you are, it matters where the dog is on the course. So often people will say to me, oh, I can't do a reverse spin because I'm too far behind my dog. There's no such thing. You can, if you, let's say you're like 4 meters further back than where Miko is now, when that dog is committed to that jump, so here, you do your reverse spin, even if you're still over at that first jump. It doesn't matter. The dogs have great peripheral vision. Even if you're 3 jumps behind, they will see you do a reverse spin. I've got a video of my border collie Shay, and she's quite fast. And there was a novice course where there was 6 jumps in a straight line and then a tunnel that she shouldn't do. And the only way out of that one was to do a reverse spin on the last jump before the tunnel. And she was a good jump and a half ahead of me by the time I did the reverse spin. And it worked perfectly. So then your eyes is your next handling element. As you can see in this screenshot or this video still, Miko is looking at the dog. So on approach to the jump, you should watch the dog. There's a few reasons for that. The first one being that if you're looking at the obstacle, then the dog is the one responsible for trying to get the connection between the two of you. And so then they can't focus on jumping or turning or anything to do with the jump. All they care about is getting that connection back with you. And that can look a few different ways. They can either run up to you and stop, so then they'll get a refusal. They can go and take an off-course obstacle because they think if there's no connection, I'll just go do my own thing. Or their commitment point can just be super late because they're watching you waiting and waiting and waiting to get instructions for what's next. So if you look at the dog, they will have a much stronger commitment to the obstacle, which then gives you the bonus of being able to get out of there and cue that turn much quicker and sooner. So really, you should be watching the dog until they are committed to the obstacle. And that's the other bonus of actually watching your dog, is you see that moment of commitment. And once they're committed, you need to turn and do your reverse spin. So you don't actually get to see the dog jumping in the reverse spin. It's really a matter of trust. And once you reach that level where you trust that the dog is going to turn and you're not babying them and trying to pull them through and trying to watch to see if they're actually turning, when you don't do those things, your turns actually become much, much better. So watching the dog until they commit. As soon as they're committed, turn, do your reverse spin and reconnect with the dog on the other side. So at no point do you actually look at the jump. You'll see it in your peripheral, but you're not looking at it directly. So let's have a look at that again on this video. So see how when the dog is jumping, Miko's not watching it at all. And when he finishes his reverse spin, he's now reconnecting with the dog by showing the side of his face here. I'm sorry if the sound is not great right now. It's just started pouring with rain here, so hopefully that hasn't affected the sound too much. So again here, watching the dog, turning as the dog is jumping. See, the dog hasn't even jumped yet, and he's still not looking at it anymore because he trusts that the dog will commit. If when you do this and you trust your dog to commit and they pull off, that's when you need to place a reward on the dog's line so that they learn to stay committed even though you're telling them where the turn to the next obstacle is. And here you can see he reconnects over his shoulder as he takes the next obstacle. So that's a really important part of eyes. So then if we go to our next handling element, that's chest. I'm just going to go back to this video from the start and we'll talk about chest. So you can see his chest is turned in on the dog's line on approach. It never faces the jump because then your chest is going to cue extension. So you want your chest to stay towards the takeoff point for the dog to cue collection. And then after the jump, your chest is going to point towards the new line for the dog. So again, at no point does your chest face the jump. It focuses on the dog's line on approach and then on the dog's line on exit. And that's it. And then feet. So feet are going to be pointing towards the dog during the reverse spin to cue collection. Again, towards that takeoff point. So not towards the jump, but towards where the dog would take off for the jump, because that's where we're wanting the dog to collect for the turn. So if we have a look at this one as a good example, you can see he takes a step with his dog side leg, so his right leg. This helps the dog to square up to the jump a little bit more. It pushes their line out and squares them up so that when they jump, they end up with a nice tight turn. And from this point of stepping towards the takeoff point, Miko's feet will turn and point towards the next obstacle. So you're always moving forward on course towards the next obstacle. You're not running backwards towards the jump. Feet and steps are actually really quite important in reverse spin, and I will follow this up with an episode of International Training Week where Janita actually discusses this point and shows the students in the follow-up emails, so keep an eye out for that one. So now talking about hands. So hands and voice are the last two handling elements, and they are the lowest on the list. Basically, your hand should stay out of the way and just supporting the dog to the jump. So your dog side hand will stay low next to your leg and just push the dog out and then disappear, and then pick the dog back up on the next side. So at no point do you bring up your other hand, because as soon as you start to bring up that off hand, it cues way too much collection for the dog, and the dog might stop or refuse. Because when you bring up your offhand, you actually end up turning your chest. And you don't want to turn your chest any further into your dog than the takeoff point. Okay, so let's continue on with the slides. So reverse spin, as I was saying, is a natural reaction from the dog. So if you were just out on a walk with your dog next to you, when you turn in towards your dog, so turn your chest and your face towards them, you'll notice they naturally turn in towards you. This is just something that dogs naturally do. And that's actually the basis of the reverse spin. So you would have seen that in the video. Whenever Miko turned in and faced his dog, the dog turned in towards him to perform the reverse spin. So let's talk about why we use reverse spins. They're not specifically for a tight turn or specifically for a wide turn. They could be used for either. So one of the most common reasons to use a reverse spin is to avoid a trap obstacle. So let's say there's a tunnel behind a jump that you don't want your dog to take. This is a great time to cue a reverse spin to show the dog that you want them to collect and turn a little bit away from that line onto the new line. So really the reverse spin is used to control your dog's line so that they see the correct obstacles on the course. The other great thing about the reverse spin is it helps you stay ahead of your dog. So you'll see in one of the next demonstration videos that if you really watch that dog's moment of commitment and you go, you could be 2 or 3 jumps ahead by the time that they land from the jump. So it's a great technique for keeping you moving forward and cueing what's next on course. It also allows you to cue turns from behind and from a larger distance. I will show you this again in a video a little bit later as well. And it's especially useful for dogs that are really strongly obstacle focused. So if you have the type of dog that's always running a few jumps ahead or taking tunnels way ahead of you before you've caught up, they're the kind of dogs that are like absolutely love reverse spins. Dogs that are a little bit more handler focused can have a little bit of trouble with continuing to the jump when you've cued that much collection. But teaching them that they're allowed to take the jump even though you've cued a turn to the next obstacle by, again, placing a reward behind the jump, so a bowl of food, a toy, something like that, will also help them have confidence in passing you on the course and moving forward on their own. So it's also a great confidence builder, the teaching steps of the reverse spin. So even if your dog doesn't need it at this stage because they're so handler focused, I would still recommend teaching it to your dog because you'll get all those benefits out of it. So now to the exciting part, my favorite part of the reverse spin, is how to actually control the turn. And this is what makes it such a reliable handling technique, because you can use it to cue the degree of turn you want. And if you've tried using reverse spin before and you didn't like it because your dog didn't turn tight enough, they took the off-course obstacle anyway, or they turned too tight or refused the jump, then one of these reasons will be why, because you either controlled it accidentally too much or not enough. So let's talk about the 3 different ways to control the tightness of the turn. The first one is the direction of your movement or motion. So the way that you move after you do the reverse spin is absolutely vital to the way that your dog moves. So let's have a look at a video on this. This is a video from the actual reverse spin course on the website. So you will see this in a lot more detail. Sorry, I'll just start it again because it skipped ahead a little. You'll see this in a lot more detail if you watch the mini course on the reverse spin in the website. So you can see that when Miko came in, he was parallel to his dog's line, and after his turn, again, he is parallel to the dog's line on exit. So dogs always think and move in parallel lines to us. So wherever you want your dog to move, you need to think about 1 meter or 3 feet lateral to that line, so to the right or to the left, and that's where you should run. If you accidentally, let's say in this situation, if you merge towards your right at all, towards that jump, your dog will be in the tunnel, probably the far tunnel entry. If you move sharply to the right side after your reverse spin, your dog will be in the first tunnel entry. And if you move too far to the left, then they will probably come to the inside of the jump. So really think about that line, as you can see here drawn with the arrows. Think about the parallel line that you need to have to create your dog's correct line. There's a few more examples in this video. So this is a backside send to a reverse spin. So here there's a lot of course, options. This is obviously quite a challenging situation. So you've got the tunnel, the weaves, the other tunnel, the jump. In this case, Tulia wants the tunnel. So she's going to move parallel to the tunnel about 1 meter, 3 feet to the left of the line. And how far that distance needs to be, and there you go, dog straight in the tunnel. How far that distance needs to be really depends on your dog. So you can see here Murray. Murray is a bit more of a distance handler. She has some physical restrictions, so she doesn't run very hard and she prefers to work at a distance. And so her dogs naturally work at a very big distance from her because that's what she's always trained them to do. So you can see she needs to be a lot further off the dog's line. And she has learnt that just with practice. So if your dog accidentally, let's say in this situation, took that jump to the left, then you'd know, okay, I was too close to my dog's line. So then you would repeat the exercise and move further to your right and see if then that pulls your dog to the right. And then you know how far your distance needs to be. And it's just practice in different contexts that will help you learn exactly how far your dog likes to work from your line. So after your reverse spin, see how Mari moves straight down that line. She doesn't step towards the left, towards the dog, because she knows that would cue that off-course jump. So it's very important to move parallel to your dog. And if in this situation that jump that's next to her was closer, so it was in the way of the line she wants to run, she would need to make sure that she did something earlier in the course that would allow her to get closer to the jump when she does the reverse spin, so that her parallel line can be somewhere where the jump is not in the way. So you just need to think about where you want your lines to be and then how to get to the point where the lines will be there. So the next element to control the tightness of your reverse spin is your eyes, and it's the timing of your head turn. So you're watching the dog and then you turn your head to the other side to reconnect with the dog. The timing of that will determine how tight your dog turns. The longer you watch your dog before you turn your head, the tighter they turn. So I will repeat that. The longer you keep your eyes on your dog before the turn, the tighter the turn will be. And that's basically because to the dog, it looks like a front cross. And then so they want to come to your inside. And then when you turn to the other side, they suddenly turn to the other side. So let's watch a video on this. And you can actually delay that timing of your head longer to get a tighter turn. So that's what you'll see happening in this video. So you can see Tulia's watching the dog on approach to the jump. And the dog's going to the backside because it's a backside send to a reverse spin to get a tighter turn. So this time she doesn't want the tunnel. This time she wants the jump to the side of the tunnel. So again, this is from our reverse spin mini course. And there is always some text that supports what you're seeing on the video so that you know what's going on. So you can see here again that when the dog lands, the handler turns their head normally and is looking at the line that they want the dog to take. So that would be the case for the tunnel. If she wanted the tunnel, she would turn her head already, reconnect with the dog immediately, and send them on that straight line to the tunnel. Now let's say she wants to do the jump that's next to the tunnel instead of the tunnel. So that's what she's going to do in this next video, and you'll see here. So if a tighter turn is needed, the handler can delay their head turn. So you would look at the takeoff side of the jump a bit longer. So keep watching that dog, and then you'll turn your gaze to the line that you want your dog to take just before they land from the jump, or even just after they land if your dog really wants to do that off-course obstacle. So the more obstacle focused your dog is, the longer you'll probably need to hold your head turn. So in some cases, you want the dog to land and take a stride before you turn your head. So see how she keeps watching the dog over her shoulder? And you'll watch this in slow motion in a minute. And you can see the dog even looks at the tunnels, but because she keeps her head turned, the dog turns in and doesn't do the tunnel like she wants. She wants him to do the jump. So here her head is turned and she's still watching the dog, still watching until she sees the moment that he decides to come towards her and not do the tunnels. And when she sees that moment, that's when she turns her head. So again, this is all about practice of learning at what time to turn your head and what your dog needs. The more handler focused your dog is, the earlier you can turn your head. The more obstacle focused, the later. But again, play around with your dog because each dog is different. And then the last way to control the tightness of your turn is with a rhythm change. So we talked about this before. The tighter turn you want, the more rhythm change you show. So basically you need to be running to some degree, because if you're standing still, you can't show a rhythm change. So you need to be running forward till your dog commits. If they're committed and you want a tight turn, then you almost want to stop. So you want to slow down quite dramatically. And then that will cue the dog to collect and turn tight. If you want to avoid a tunnel, but you don't want the dog to turn too tight, then you might not show a rhythm change at all. So let's have a look at a video for this. There we go. So this is from an International Training Week as well. And you'll see here that this handler wants quite a tight turn, so she stopped running completely and stood still until the dog was committed, and then she moved out of the turn straight away to help the dog turn tight. And again, this is a different handler, different dog, but doing the same turn. So again, she stops and then moves away. She moved away a bit sooner, didn't stop as long, because this dog doesn't need as much collection. This is a different part of the course where the turn's not so tight, so it's from this next jump to the back side of the next jump. So here you can see she shows no rhythm change at all. She just basically turns on the spot to tell the dog not to take the obstacle straight ahead, but to turn to the backside of the next jump. So I will show you that one more time, I think, because it was quite a quick video. So I'll give you some more time to look. So you can see she quite dramatically stops, waits for the dog to collect, moves away. And that's why this dog does quite a tight turn and looks at this jump instead of the jump to its left that it would have taken without the reverse spin. Same thing here. She takes one extra step to help support the jump for the dog because it's not as obstacle focused, and then moves away. Whereas this handler simply moves through the steps of the reverse spin without actually showing any kind of rhythm change at all, because she wants the back side of the jump. If she wanted the front side, then she probably would have showed some rhythm change there. All right, let's go back to the slides. Okay, so that's your 3 elements. And again, we'll discuss these in even more detail when we go to the emails. So where to use the reverse spin? Sorry, this depends a lot. So where to use the reverse spin? This depends a lot on the dog and how much turning information they need. So usually a smaller dog with lots of stride doesn't need as much turning information. So they might only use a reverse spin for extreme trap obstacles or quite tight turns. Whereas, let's say a really fast border collie who loves tunnels might need reverse spins a lot more. So I have one of those, and I also have one of the other ones. So I've got an English Toy Terrier who's smaller and quite handler focused, and for him I probably have used maybe 15 in his career. And then I have a border collie who's young and in Novice, and with her I've probably already used 100. So it really depends on the dog. And don't feel like, oh, they're doing a reverse spin there, so I need to do that too when you see someone walk a course, because that's not going to be correct for your dog. So remember to learn about your dog by practicing it in many different contexts, and then you will, like, each time that you practice it and use it and it works, you will learn, and each time it doesn't work, you will learn, because it will teach you that, okay, there, it was the wrong choice, or I did it too late. If you're not sure which one of those is happening, please video and send it to us, because we're more than happy to help you work out what's going on and what you need to change. Usually it's such a small thing, like turn your head sooner, show more rhythm change, don't watch your dog while they're jumping, those sorts of things. Then avoiding trap obstacles is a great place to use a reverse spin. So whenever that you're worried about the obstacle behind the obstacle the dog needs to take, then reverse spin there is good. Cueing a turn from behind or at a distance. I love using reverse spinning gamblers because it gives you that extra level of control even though you're at a distance. That's really handy there. Basically any degree of turn between a straight line and a complete wrap. So again, you can use those 3 elements to cue how much of a turn you want, but reverse spin is very flexible in terms of where you use it. And I'm going to reiterate it again, your dog is your best coach. So they will tell you if it was too much information or not enough information. So make sure you don't correct them, still reward them. If you did a reverse spin and they still took the off-course obstacle, it's fine. You can reward your dog, just a little reward. Yeah, good dog, here's a little something. Let's try that again, and I'll turn earlier this time and let's see what happens. And then next time your dog will turn. And if, like, you turned so early, like 10 steps before the jump, and the dog still didn't turn, again, send us a video. And usually this is the case of the dog being patterned, or the dog not having a connection with you before you do your reverse spin. So then they're not watching you, they're just watching the course. So it's really important to establish that connection by watching the dog and making sure they're watching you before you start running this sort of a sequence with a reverse spin. So let's have a look at some example sequences. This is quite a large course, obviously, and again, where I'm going to say I would probably use a reverse spin might not be where you need it, so it depends on your dog. But everything I've circled in red is a position where you might use a reverse spin. So 1, 2, 3. On number 2, obviously the dog sees the tunnel, that's off to the left a little bit. They might even see 2119 if they're that way inclined, or they might see the weaves. So lots of options here. So we want to cue a turn to 3. So I think with probably all my dogs, I would do a reverse spin on 2 in this situation. And remember that even though it's from the start line, you don't want to lead out because you want to show movement or motion to show a rhythm change. So you probably want to lead out to just past the tire and then move together towards 2. And when the dog is committed, do your reverse spin and then send to the backside of 3. Then we've got 4 as a dog walk, 5 is that jump up there. 5 to 6 to 7, you probably want to do a front cross on 5 to collect the dog, but make sure that you change sides so the tunnel's on the correct side. Then when the dog is in 7, you will do some sort of a side change between 7 and 8, let's say a blind cross while the dog's in the tunnel. Now 8 is a backside send, and again here I would do a backside reverse spin because the dog's natural line on 8 is to slice that jump. And they would look at 16, they would look at the A-frame. So again, they've got options. So if your dog is super handler focused and will just turn, or if even you just moving away doing a bit of a post turn is enough of a cue, you don't need it. But if your dog is one who's going to look at 16 or the A-frame, then you do need it. So then as you send to the backside, reverse spin like you saw Tulio doing, and then into the tunnel. This is not a super tight turn. So again, this is one where you would not show any rhythm change. You would turn your head early and the direction of your motion would be parallel to tunnel number 9 after you do your reverse spin. So it's important to think about those 3 elements when you're working out the reverse spin on the course. Now 10, you have trap obstacle number 13. So obviously the dog's going to think tunnel, broad tunnel. So in this case, you want to do a reverse spin on 10. If you have a dog that will do that, to tell them that it's not 10. That it's not tunnel. It's tunnel, then the long jump, and then number 11 jump. So again, this is one where you don't have a super tight turn, and because it's a long jump or a broad, you don't want the dog to collect too much because they might slice the inside of the jump. So again, we're not showing any rhythm change here. We're going to turn our head nice and early as soon as the dog commits to the jump. And then our movement is going to be towards 11. Where exactly you're going to move after that depends on how fast your dog is, how fast you are, as to what you would handle here. So you could either do a reverse spin on 10 and keep the dog on your left and do a tandem turn into 12, or you could do a blind cross between 11 and 12, for example, lots of options. If you were super fast coming out of 8, you might even get a front cross in between 10 and 11 instead of a reverse spin. That would also be an option. So again, lots of handling options, but reverse spin on 10 is definitely one option. So now 12 to 13, you might do a blind cross or a tandem turn, for example. 14, 15, 16 is a backside to a front cross. And then 17 is another spot where I would do a reverse spin. So in this case, obviously it's quite a tight turn between 17 and going into the tunnel. So you want to help the dog out unless your dog is, again, super handler focused and will turn with just a post turn there. But if they turn a bit wider, then a reverse spin there is a good spot. You might show a bit more rhythm change here. And remember that your line of motion after 17 would be parallel to tunnel 18 until your dog commits to the tunnel. And then you would move in position for 19, maybe layer the jump, do maybe a force front cross, lots of options there. Into tunnel 20, and then you would show some sort of collection cue going into tunnel 20. So I didn't circle this one, but you could even actually do a little bit of a reverse spin going into the tunnel, and that cues quite a tight turn out of a tunnel. So they're quite handy that way, but you do want to change sides for 21, 22, 23. So you're probably more likely to show an early front cross as the dog enters tunnel 20, and then you have them on your right-hand side for the run home. So lots of spots here where you could do reverse spins. Now let's have a look at a smaller sequence. So here there's obviously a tunnel trap after 3. So that's where you would be using the reverse spin. Again, you don't want to lead out too much because you want to show motion with your dog. I know it's scary with a tunnel focused fast dog to run up to jump 3 because you feel like your motion is going to push them into the tunnel. But that's the whole point. So by running there, you're going to slow down, and that change of motion coupled with the rest of the elements that cue a reverse spin will stop the dog going into the tunnel. And you're there. Whereas if you are scared to get near the tunnel, then your dog is not getting any information. And so they're just going to go, well, I'll just go straight in the tunnel then. So if you can be there showing early information, that's much more effective than trying to stay away from obstacles. So running up towards 3, even if you're still at 2 by the time your dog is on the takeoff point of 3, you do your reverse spin from 2. That's fine. Wherever you are when the dog is committed to 3, that's when you reverse spin. And then if you felt like practicing a second reverse spin, you could also do one on 4. or you could do a front cross, or you could just do a post turn if your dog doesn't need that much turning information. But this is a great little backyard size sequence to set up if you want to practice some reverse spins. The other thing you can do here as well is practice 2 different levels of reverse spin. So you could do one from 3 to 4 with a bit of a tighter turn, so more rhythm change, and the direction of your motion should be basically parallel to that 30-foot line. And then you could do the next time, you could do the off end of the tunnel. So in this case, the entry on the right of the tunnel, you can also do that with a reverse spin. So you still do a reverse spin in 3, but with no rhythm change. And your line of motion is now, if you think of your dog's line from number 3 to that tunnel entry, then your line of motion is about 1 meter or 3 feet to the right of that on a parallel line. And that will get you the off tunnel entry. So you could set this up as a bit of an either or exercise where you basically do one course several different ways, so to make sure your dog is watching you. And the first time you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, then 1, 2, 3 off tunnel entry, and then 1, 2, 3 straight tunnel entry, and then back again to 1, 2, 3, 4, for example. That would be a great way to make sure your dog is watching you and to practice 2 different levels of collection cue with the reverse spin. So that brings me to the end of the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it and that it made you think that reverse spins can actually become a great reliable tool for your handling toolbox. Remember that tools are only effective when you understand how they work. So by really deeply understanding what it is that causes that technique to work for the dog and what parts of that technique they're understanding, it really makes the tool much, much more effective. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to send me an email at support@oneminddogs.com or press the chat bubble on the OneMind Dogs website and I'll be more than happy to answer. Even you could send in a video of you and your dog doing a reverse spin if you need some help. I'd be happy to give you some feedback. Thank you.